The music you are listening in the background is an extract from the overture of La Gazza Ladra, The Thieving Magpie, composed by Gioacchino Rossini in 1817, and that in 1971, more or less 150 years later, Stanley Kubrick used for some memorable scenes of his masterpiece Clockwork Orange, that in Italy was translated as Arancia Meccanica, literally mechanical orange. Of course, and that's my opinion, if you've never watched this movie, I think you're very lucky because you still have the possibility to enjoy it for the first time. Anyway, the Rossini Overture, that together with the Ninth Symphony of Beethoven is the most important part of the soundtrack of the movie, is used by Kubrick to emphasize, ironically and by contrast, all the aggression and psychopathology of Alex, the main character of the movie, as well as the gang with whom he organizes very violent actions, but that are always proposed by the filmmaker from a satirical perspective. Of course, we are not here to talk about Kubrick and his movie, even if, science and art have in common lots of stuff. So, instead of talking about the Clockwork Orange, that I remind you in Italy was mechanical orange, we will talk about mechanical resistance of raw and dried ceramic material, a topic that today, more than ever, is very hot and some way violent, just like Alex. We will therefore try to offer, as usual, a general overview, highlighting the origins of the problem and proposing a range of possible actions to contain or even avoid it. I am Davide Trentini, and this is Apparently Invisible: Chemistry in Ceramic. The value of mechanical resistance of raw ceramics is usually regulated by the Uni-ISO standard, and it's measured by a device that is called chrometro. What kind of tool is this? This is a precision tool able to define the breaking force and the flexural strength of the ceramic support by applying a force that gradually increases in the middle of the sample under examination, that is our raw tile, until it breaks. In general, the mechanical resistance of raw and dry tiles must always be carefully checked. This was in the past when the ceramic support used to undergo too high stresses in terms of bending and compression due to the old decoration process by means of flat screen printing or silicone engraved roller machine. This kind of application system, of course, involved a real contact between the tool, such as a roller, for example, and the tile, and therefore the applied weight was very considerable. But the measuring of the mechanical resistance is still very important, despite traditional decoration processes have been increasingly replaced by the digital printing process that by nature does not stress the support with any kind of weight. In fact, the evolution of the decoration system that also led to a new aesthetic vision has imposed a new and different approach to mechanical strength. What do I mean? I mean that the increasing of tiles dimension, that today can be even more than 120 by 300 centimeters, of course, has made the ceramic support more sensitive to deformation, or more generally to all those stresses that can occur on the conveyor rollers and that can deform or even break the tile. This is the reason why we should talk about maximum angle of deformation before its breaking point instead of flexural strength. Let's try to understand why. Large-size ceramics are often subjected along the production line to the stress of their own weight that can cause deformations until they break. Here is a practical example. Let's take two different tiles with the same thickness. The first one is a 60 by 60, and the second one is a 120 by 120. And let's now try to keep them suspended by hanging them at their opposite edges or corner. What happened? The smaller, which is the 60 by 60, despite its weight is not small, probably does not get any damage. The larger size instead could more easily break in the middle due to its own weight. This very simple example underlines that the modulus of rupture is identical, since we did not apply any extra weight, but the result is very different. And it also explains that even without pressure, large-sized raw tiles can be more easily affected, for example, by the presence of bumps along the production line or by a low planarity of the conveyor rollers. And here we add another piece to our understanding by saying that the weight of the tile may also affect the impact resistance. On the one hand, a small collision along the production line could not be a problem for a small-sized raw tile, because the tile could be easily blocked along the line without breaking, leading, however, to different kinds of problems such as a production stop. On the other hand, the same kind of collision might be critical for a larger sized raw tile that could probably crack. After this short and simple introduction, the question is, what are the elements to consider that can affect the mechanical resistance of a tile? The answer is in this case quite easy. Clays, the kind and the nature of clays, are surely the first in line. The different features of clays, of course, differently affects not only the quality of the tiles but also the proper development of the production process. And among the several raw materials available on the market, plastic or very plastic clays, marked by a high surface area and by the ability to absorb a large amount of water, can surely improve the mechanical feature of the raw tiles, even if their use is properly and carefully calibrated by producers. Why? What do I mean? Well, all ceramic bodies are usually made of different kinds of clays that are blended to reach a good level of fluidization, sintering, proper coefficient of thermal expansion, as well as a constant tension of water during the drying and so the evaporation process. However, to reduce the use of very plastic clays means to give up high-performing raw materials in terms of mechanical resistance, and this reduction can sometimes lead to ceramic bodies that are unable to avoid tiles cracking along the glazing line. So, one may ask, why don't we change the formula of the mix and so we solve the problem at its origin? Well, to modify the formulation of ceramic mix is very complex, and that's why it's usually better to take different actions with a lower impact, And now, let's finally see which are these actions. The use of temporary binders, so-called according to their ability to bind the tile only until the prefiring stage, is surely the easiest way to increase the mechanical resistance of dry tiles. These chemicals act differently from normal binders that, once they are added to the ceramic mix, permanently increase the mechanical resistance of the tile even after firing. But one more step. Binders are usually made of organic molecules able to promote a binding action toward the raw materials of the mixture, especially with clays. But what happened from a chemical point of view? A molecule of temporary binder contains functional groups that are part of the molecule able to chemically interact with other materials, able to form a lattice or a cross-linking both between the micelle and the harder inorganic raw materials. They basically link together the inorganic particles, increasing the mechanical resistance after the drying process. And another question. When the binder must be added, in which part of the production process? Here we have two options. First, during the milling process of the raw materials, of course, or second, in the barbottina or slurry, which is the mix of clay, raw materials and water. Let's go now a little deeper. This is a very important detail that points out how, and especially when, the temporary binder starts its action. This detail is all about the role of water. Let's see why. As we have already seen in a previous episode of this podcast, the slurry, once it has reached the proper features, enters the atomizers, where the water, undergoes to an important and strong evaporation process that leads to the formation of granules, or we could say also hollow spheres, marked by a residual humidity that is normally ranges from 5% to 7%. After this process inside the atomizer, the atomized powder that already contains the temporary binder form, after the pressing stage, the raw ceramic body that still have inside the residual humidity. And it is exactly the presence of this water that prevents the binder to completely perform. In other words, since the binder is surrounded by water molecules, it does not totally work. So at this moment, clay's particles are only partially bound. The temporary binder, in fact, starts its action only after the drying process. The dryer completes the evaporation of the residual humidity that, leaving the clays, the hard raw materials, and the temporary binder's molecules, leads to the formation of bonds between the organic and inorganic molecules. As usual, even in this case, we cannot talk about a universal product that can be indifferently used in all production companies. It is always necessary to study inside the lab the proper solution that can fit the different parameters of producers. And of course, the use of temporary binder, even if it's the most effective, is not the only solution. We could say that beside the use of binders, it could be helpful to start corrective action that can positively affect the mechanical resistance of the tile as well, supporting the role of binders. The end of the episode is near, so let's finally see some scenarios that might decrease the mechanical resistance, offering of course also a suggestion to prevent this critical situation. The list could be much longer, but we must make a choice. The first is about the overwetting of the raw ceramic support. In this case, it could be possible to increase the density of the glaze, or more generally, to decrease the amount of water along the glazing line. The second negative scenario may be promoted by an improper setup of the dryer, that, for example, could lead to a too rapid evaporation process that in turn may produce tensions, facilitating the formation of cracks or weak spots. The third and last example is about the possible low humidity of the atomized powder that could be the origin of a low cohesion of the ceramic body. To solve the problem, in this specific case, it could be probably necessary the adjustment of the dryer's parameters to provide the granules with a higher residual humidity. Anyway, I stop here the list of examples by saying that in all these cases, depending on the severity of the situation, it is possible to take a first action in the different production step, such as the drying or the pressing one, by adjusting the parameters. And secondly, it will be important to choose the proper temporary binder that, in any case, must be always studied and developed according to the target. With this list, today's episode has come to an end. I thank you for being with us, and I remind you as usual that all the podcasts are available not only on the main platform, such as Spotify, Apple or Google Podcast, but also on our app, in which you can find other interesting contents and that you can download for free on Apple Store or Google Play. You can find it by typing Z and S Ceramco, CERAMCO.IT, or apparently invisible. As an exception, let me point out that after my greetings, the Rossini music will come back for 2 or 3 minutes, just in case you like it and you want to relax. Enjoy and see you soon.